Think about this for a moment. Some of the most intelligent people in history, Nietzsche, Tesla, Kafka, lived in deep isolation, battling inner turmoil until the very end. These were not just intellectual giants. They were minds that saw further than others, that questioned more, that felt the weight of existence more profoundly. And yet, despite their brilliance, they suffered. Why? Have you ever felt that thinking too much leads you in circles? That the more you understand, the less certain you become? If you've ever found yourself lying awake at night, overanalyzing a simple thought into something unbearable, you know the feeling. Intelligence, at first glance, seems like a gift, an advantage. But does it also carry a hidden curse? There's a paradox here. Intelligence should, in theory, make life easier. A sharp mind should be able to solve problems efficiently, avoid common pitfalls, and navigate life with precision. And yet, the opposite often happens. The more intelligent a person is, the more they recognize the flaws, the contradictions, the absurdities of life. What others accept without question, social norms, belief systems, even the meaning of life, becomes a labyrinth of uncertainty. Socrates famously declared, "The only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing." But think about the weight of that realization. If intelligence leads to wisdom, and wisdom leads to the awareness of our own ignorance, then what does intelligence truly offer us? It forces us to confront how little we actually understand, how chaotic and unpredictable the world really is. And maybe that's why intelligence doesn't always bring happiness. A less reflective mind sees the world in clear, simple terms. A highly intelligent one, it sees too many possibilities, too many contradictions, too many reasons to question. And questioning, while necessary for progress, often leads to doubt, frustration, and even despair. So the question remains, is intelligence really an asset, or is it a burden? If intelligence leads us toward complexity and doubt, does it inevitably lead to misery? Or is there something else at play? This is where we begin our search for answers. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt trapped inside your own mind? Not just lost in thought, but caught in an endless loop of analysis, questioning, second-guessing every decision, every possibility? If so, you're not alone. This is one of the defining struggles of intelligence. The ability to think deeply, to see patterns where others don't, to anticipate outcomes before they happen. It's a powerful gift. But it's also a dangerous one. The more intelligent you are, the more your mind refuses to settle. Where others see a simple decision, you see layers upon layers of potential consequences. A single choice becomes a web of possibilities, each one branching into infinite directions. And what happens? You hesitate. You overthink. You become paralyzed by analysis. This is what some philosophers call hyperrational doubt, the tendency of intelligent minds to dissect everything to the point where no answer feels satisfying. Take Descartes, for example. He doubted everything, his senses, his thoughts, even his own existence, until he could find one unshakable truth. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But let's be honest, how many people actually live like this? Most people don't question reality this deeply. They take things as they come, and they move forward without tormenting themselves over every unknown. And in many ways, they are happier for it. This is the paradox of intelligence. The more you think, the more aware you become of uncertainty. And uncertainty breeds anxiety. A less reflective mind can accept life's mysteries and move on. An intelligent one, it sees too many contradictions, too many flaws in the systems that hold society together, too many reasons to doubt. But is this inevitable? Is overthinking a necessary side effect of intelligence? Or is it possible to think deeply without being consumed by thought? That's where we need to go next. Have you ever found yourself holding back in a conversation, not because you have nothing to say, but because you know your thoughts will be met with silence, confusion, or dismissal? Have you ever questioned why certain things are the way they are, only to realize that most people don't even think to ask? If so, you've likely experienced one of the most painful contradictions of intelligence. The more deeply you think, the harder it becomes to connect. Intelligence sets people apart, not because it makes them superior, but because it alters the way they experience the world. A highly intelligent person doesn't just see what is, they see what could be, what should be, and, perhaps most painfully, what never will be. Where others see simple truths, they see hidden complexities. Where others find comfort in certainty, they find only more questions. But intelligence doesn't just create distance in thought, it creates distance in feeling. The ability to think deeply often comes with the ability to feel deeply. A mind that notices subtle details in logic also notices subtle details in emotion, in human behavior, in the shifting dynamics of social interaction. And what does this lead to? An awareness of deception, of manipulation, of the unsaid tensions that most people ignore. It leads to frustration at the superficiality of social conventions, at the way people avoid difficult conversations, at the ease with which others accept the very things that feel unbearable to an intelligent mind. This is why some of history's greatest thinkers lived in isolation. It wasn't just that they were different, it was that their difference made integration nearly impossible. Nietzsche saw the contradictions in morality and tore them apart, but in doing so, he alienated himself from those who still needed those illusions. Kafka perceived the absurdity of bureaucratic systems so clearly that he felt trapped inside them, unable to escape even in his own imagination. Tesla's genius allowed him to envision a world that had not yet arrived, but in doing so, he lost touch with the one he lived in. And yet, the loneliness of intelligence is not just about being misunderstood, it is about seeing beyond the common perspective. It is about recognizing things that most people never even think to question. But the real question is, does intelligence necessarily separate us from others? Or is there a way to bridge the gap between deep thought and human connection? An intelligent mind is a pattern-seeking machine. It notices inconsistencies in logic, contradictions in belief systems, and flaws in human nature. But this awareness extends beyond intellectual analysis. It seeps into emotions, relationships, and the way we perceive existence itself. A person of average intelligence might see suffering as an unfortunate part of life, something to accept and move on from. But a highly intelligent person asks, why does suffering exist at all? Is it necessary? Could it be prevented? And if it could, why haven't we done so? This is where intelligence and emotional suffering become intertwined. Intelligence allows a person to understand the world with clarity, but clarity often reveals harsh realities. It unveils the cruelty of nature, the fragility of human relationships, the illusions people cling to in order to make life bearable. It exposes the hypocrisy in moral systems, the failures of justice, the randomness of fate. And with this awareness comes a deep frustration, even despair. Think of David Foster Wallace, a brilliant writer who saw through the illusions of modern life, so much so that he could no longer participate in them without suffering. He understood the emptiness behind consumer culture, the loneliness buried in everyday interactions, the way people distract themselves from the void. But what did this understanding bring him? Not peace, not happiness. Instead, it became a weight he couldn't carry anymore. The same can be said of philosophers like Schopenhauer, who saw life as a cycle of endless desire and disappointment, or Camus, who understood the absurdity of existence but struggled with what to do in response. Intelligence allows us to comprehend these truths, but comprehension does not mean comfort. In fact, the opposite is often true. The more we understand, the more we suffer. So what do we do with this knowledge? If intelligence leads to awareness, and awareness leads to suffering, is there any way to break the cycle? Or is suffering an inevitable price for seeing reality as it truly is? There is a common belief that intelligence alone should be enough to navigate life successfully. After all, an intelligent person should be able to think their way through any problem, right? But intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing. In fact, they often stand in opposition to one another. Intelligence is about processing information, seeing patterns, and understanding complexity. Wisdom is about knowing how to live. You can be highly intelligent and still be miserable. You can understand the flaws in human nature, the chaos of the universe, the inevitability of suffering, and still have no idea how to find peace. You can analyze emotions with precision and yet be unable to regulate your own. Intelligence, by itself, does not provide a guide for happiness. It simply expands the field of possibilities, making it harder to know which path to follow. Take the difference between a philosopher and a monk. A philosopher may spend years questioning the meaning of existence, breaking apart moral systems, deconstructing ideas of truth and meaning. But does this bring them happiness? Rarely. The more they question, the more they doubt. The more they analyze, the more uncertain they become. A monk, on the other hand, does not need to prove or disprove the nature of reality. They do not need to dissect every illusion to understand that peace is found in stillness, in acceptance, in detaching from the endless pursuit of answers. This is where intelligence often falls into a trap. It assumes that the more we know, the closer we get to happiness. But wisdom suggests something different. It suggests that happiness is not found in knowing more, but in knowing how to live with what we know. Intelligence without wisdom becomes an engine of endless questioning, a mind that consumes itself in its search for certainty. But wisdom is what allows a person to step back from the search and ask, do I need all the answers to be at peace? This distinction is critical because it means that intelligence alone is not enough. A person can be a genius and still feel lost. They can see the deepest truths of reality and still suffer. So the question becomes, how do we bridge the gap? How do we move from intelligence, which sees everything but knows no peace, to wisdom, which understands that peace is not about seeing everything, but about knowing what to focus on? If you've made it this far, if you're the kind of person who wrestles with these questions, who refuses to accept easy answers, who wants to think deeper and explore ideas that most people shy away from, then this is the place for you. Subscribe, because this journey doesn't end here. There are more questions to ask, more ideas to challenge, more perspectives to explore. And if intelligence is a burden, then at least let's carry it together. We've spent this journey dissecting intelligence, how it leads to overthinking, isolation, emotional suffering, and the endless pursuit of knowledge without fulfillment. But now we must confront the real question. Is intelligence truly a curse, or is there another way to see it? It's easy to assume that intelligence dooms us to misery. The evidence is compelling. History is filled with brilliant minds who suffered deeply: Nietzsche, Tesla, Kafka, Schopenhauer, Wallace. But maybe the problem isn't intelligence itself. Maybe the problem is how we use it, how we let it control us rather than learning to control it. Because intelligence, when left unchecked, becomes self-consuming. It questions relentlessly, it overanalyzes, it isolates, it creates problems even where none exist. But intelligence, when combined with wisdom, becomes something else entirely. It becomes a tool, not a burden. What if intelligence isn't meant to give us all the answers? What if it's meant to help us find the right questions? What if its purpose isn't to lead us to certainty, but to make us comfortable with uncertainty? Think about this. The wisest people in history weren't those who had all the answers. They were the ones who knew how to live despite the absence of answers. The ones who understood that intelligence alone is never enough. That knowledge without purpose is just noise. That deep thought without direction leads nowhere. So does intelligence lead to misery? It can, but it doesn't have to. The key is not in thinking less, but in thinking better. In learning when to analyze and when to let go. In knowing that while the mind is a powerful tool, it is not the master of our happiness, only we are.